everyone, and welcome to Founding an AI Startup, Do's and Don'ts of Building a Company. My name is Catherine Baird. I'm an associate builder for AI Fund, and I will be your host and moderator. We appreciate you taking the time to join us for the event. We're so glad to see you tuning in from all over the world. We have attendees from over 140 countries today. If it's late for you, thank you for staying up for us. Our event today covers the do's and don'ts and the highs and lows and the lessons learned of building an AI startup. And we're just going to jump right in today. If you hear anything during our discussion that prompts a question you'd like to ask one of our panelists, please follow the Slido link in the description box on the YouTube page. And if you're just listening, you can click the link to see the questions that have been asked and upvote your favorites. Our speakers will do their best to answer most of your upvoted questions during the Q&A portion of this event. So without further ado, let's welcome our speakers. Seamus McAteer is the CEO of SpeechLabs. Priyansha Bagaria is the founder and CEO of Loopr.AI. And Jason Brooks is the founder of Harkness.AI. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to have you all here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Seamus, I'd love to just kick off with you. You're the founder and CEO of SpeechLabs, and you're an experienced entrepreneur and operator. Tell us a little bit about your background, about SpeechLabs, and about your experience.
Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur I've founded 3 companies of my own prior to SpeechLabs, successfully exited those companies through trade sale, primarily in the data space. My first company, the first company I founded was the currency data set for the mobile internet called M-Metrics. It was acquired by Comscore after they went public. I subsequently started a company that built on my experience there and my experience at working with a company that was bringing data to hedge funds. And we built a ad platform in the mobile space, ostensibly to mine the resultant data exhaust to use for targeting. We sold that pretty quickly, actually. It was acquired by Millennial Media after they went public. They wanted the team and our tech. I headed up data analytics there and left with one of their top engineers to build a company. We focused on micro-location analytics. Probably the wrong bet, but we built some cool tech. We had a great team, and we found a home for the team, successfully so. Everyone did quite well at Newstar, where we were the foundation of their IoT business. I subsequently worked with the founders of Otter.ai, Sam Liang and Yoon Fu, to help them launch Otter. I joined when it was a handful of engineers and PhDs. And that really got me enmeshed in the whole area of bringing an AI product to market. So worked there for 3.5 years, had a great run there. And I founded SpeechLabs. It was incubated at AI Fund. It was built on some ideas that the folks at AI Fund had in the speech area. And our focus at SpeechLabs is to make the world universally accessible for people who speak different languages by building a platform for speech-to-speech translation. That's what we're doing at SpeechLabs.
Excellent. Well, I get the sense that you've got some war stories and some good advice for new founders out there. So thank you so much for joining us. Priyansha, you are the founder and CEO of Loopr.AI and a 4th-generation entrepreneur and family business in manufacturing. I would love to hear about your background, what you were doing before you started Loopr, and what Loopr is up to.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. So I am the 4th-generation entrepreneur in my family business of manufacturing electrical insulation, which is completely different from what AI is all about. And I did computer science engineering, did my master's from Netherlands, worked with a lot of big multinational companies over there. But the entrepreneurship in my blood was always there. And I was like, how do I, starting my own company? And And after doing my MBA, I did a data science fellowship from Cornell, and that was my first exposure to AI. And after that, I joined as a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, for an AI startup, AI consulting startup, which was focusing a lot on retail use cases. So some of the challenges which I saw, which I noticed while I was trying to sell the consulting AI consulting projects, the biggest challenges were like when you go to a consulting company to build an AI solution, it takes at least a quarter to at least a $500,000 to build any solution. And the time it takes to build that solution is roughly a year long time. Now, for a lot of companies out there, they don't understand technology, especially on the manufacturing, agriculture, aerospace side. Technology is something they have no idea about. And when you go and talk to them about that, it's like, why would I give you away $500,000 if I don't even know what to expect at the end of the day, right? Like it's like it's a lot of money. And that's when, like, I was like, hey, why don't we productize a lot of things that we can do, which can be easily implemented for the company. And so what we've done is we've reduced the time that it takes to build a product, build a AI solution from a year to less than a month, and the time and the cost it takes is from $500,000 to less than $50,000. And that's what Loopr is all about. And we're really focusing a lot on, because manufacturing is very close to my heart. That's what I've come from. Like, my background is all around that. And I'm here really trying my best to help manufacturers, with solutions like defect detection, predictive maintenance, document digitization. These are the use cases which is very prominent across all manufacturing companies, and trying to really get them a solution which is very quick to adopt, and which doesn't take a lot of time and money. So this is all Loopr is all about.
That's fantastic. It's an AI startup that's really propelling people, non-AI industries, into their AI future. That's so great. Jason, the founder of Harkness.AI, you have a very interesting background, and I'd love to hear about your background and Harkness and what everything has been like.
Absolutely. So part of my background sort of ties in what Seamus and Priyansha sort of said, but I'm originally from LA, South Central LA, born and raised in the late 80s, early 90s. And just to give you a sense of sort of the environment that I grew up in, I was at my 7th birthday party. I saw my first person get shot and killed. And from there, I won the parent Olympics, and they had the foresight to figure out that, like, wow, our family unit was really tight, cohesive, and really worked well. The environment wasn't one that was conducive to keeping me physically safe. So they sent me to an all-boys boarding school out in Claremont, California. So it's kind of going from the hood to Hogwarts. And there I was exposed to really high-octane classmates and incredible teachers, right? And we all learned around the Harkness table. So it's a 100-year teaching technique where you get really great students and really good faculty around the table reading the classics. And then my professors by hand would sort of track our interaction. That led me to an 18-year career in teaching, where I taught Mandarin, Spanish, and mathematics. And then COVID hit. And I imagine we all have these stories where the pandemic changed the course of our lives. But I was met with muted mics and blank video feeds, trying to figure out how the heck do I connect with my faculty and my students. And then I realized I'd gone to a pretty good high school, and I think there might be a solution here. So by hand, I tracked interaction of all of my classes and the faculty meetings and all the things. And I just saw a profound transformation in the way that we interacted, because that awareness of how and with whom we interacted, you can't unsee it, right? Once you see that, oh my gosh, I only talked to 2 people in a class of 18 people, and I'm ignoring all of the other 60 people at the table. You have to do something about that. It's really hard to sit without making that change. So then it's totally surreal, and I'm a little bit of a fanboy here, but my first entree into AI was through the NLP deep learning specialization through deeplearning.ai. So that was about 1.5 years ago. So went from there to Fourth Brain, which is another AI fund company, and got trained up. And my capstone project, the final project, was the core technology that powers Harkness now. And then reached out to two former students of mine, Evan Ellison and Keenan Hale, and we founded the company in October of 21. So we've been developing the technology for 6 months now. Just came out of a 6-month incubator and are out in the market. So it's a little bit about me. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. So let's go ahead and dive into our discussion. So for the next half hour, I'm going to be asking questions directed to specific members of our panel, and I encourage panelists to jump in with their input, anything to enhance the conversation. Similarly, all of you out there in the audience, all across the world, please provide any feedback on the discussion or questions you have so far directly in the YouTube live chat or questions to the Slido. So we're going to be covering a lot of ground today, from company formation to product market fit to team building and to fundraising. But I'd love to kick off our discussion the same way that AI companies start, which is the decision to take the enormous risk to change your career and change your trajectory. So Jason, we just touched on this a little bit, but after 18 years of teaching, that's a massive change both in your work and your day-to-day. Can you talk about the challenges and opportunities of that transition and what it was about the Harkness idea that made you take that leap?
Yeah, right. So I've heard once before that necessity is the mother of invention. And when you're really trying to just make it through an experience that nobody on the planet had experienced before, you just got to survive, right? And at the point in my career, I was running a school there, and sort of had to figure out how to do it. So I knew early on that my time in education was coming to an end, right? I'd been there for 18 years. So I'd sort of raised a bunch of different children, but over an 18-year period, right? So I felt like I'd done my work. I raised a kid, now go off to college. But was looking for the next thing and really trying to figure out where that was. Knew I wanted to be in the AI ML space, solving a bunch of problems around ed tech, just knowing that we're in a profound moment as a species, right? The planet's on fire. There's a lot of problems that can be solved, and education, to the extent that we can educate folks well, I want to be a part of that movement. And then really came to the idea when COVID forced it. And it was like, oh my gosh, this thing works. And AI, the promise and the allure of AI is that we get to automate incredibly tedious processes. And that was what I was doing on a daily basis. And it kind of, there was a eureka moment when I'll never forget this. A young lady in my class said, Mr. Brooks, all the baseball boys only talk to each other. And if you don't do something about it, I will. And I was like, oh, okay. That is a very clear direction. One, thank you for having the boldness. And then two, I'll follow that path, and that path led me to Harkness.AI.
That's great. And what about your day-to-day? Obviously, going out and being a founder is, being in a classroom with lots of different humans around you to suddenly being on a super small team. What has that been like?
Yeah, so it's been a really significant transition, right? So at the beginning, I thought we'd be an ed tech solution. But one of the things that happens every day is that you talk to a ton of people. And it felt like, I was telling somebody the other day, it felt like we had invented a trap. Like most AI companies are trying to build a better mousetrap. We had built a trap and trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what can we catch in this thing? So we had to talk to a lot of different people to figure out a solution. And we're still in that process every day, iterating, talking to our folks. But most of my day-to-day is just talking to folks from literally all over the planet and figuring out their problems and seeing how our solution can really make their day better.
Oh, that's great. So you're still keeping that community around
Absolutely.
you, even though it's not physically in your classroom.
Yeah, because the tech has been normed, right? Like we can all talk to each other, right? Like we're all in really different parts of the world. So let's keep going.
Yeah. That's great. Priyansha, you had been working in the AI industry as a consultant before founding Loopr. So how have those two modalities been different, working with clients and running your own show? And is there anything that you could tell your former self? What would you want to know?
Yeah, so in an AI consulting, right, the approach is very different. The time it takes to really get the deal done is much, much, much longer. And what I've personally experienced is like, when you go to a customer and you just show them a PowerPoint, like, okay, this is, what is the possibility, what you can expect towards the end. But now the difference is when I go to a customer, I can show them a demo on their own data in less than a week. It's a huge game changer. Now they can see really how it's going to impact them. And that's what the difference I've really seen between a product and a consulting company. Like the time it takes to really close a deal is much faster. Of course, it has taken some time to build these. So what we've done is we've created a platform which takes care of the end-to-end AI lifecycle. So it starts from data pre-processing to data annotation to model training to model in real-time inferencing to model governance. So everything can be done through one platform. And what we've really been focusing on is a lot around transfer learning, because there's so many great models that exist out there. And when you go to a customer and you be like, hey, I can start show you something, but give me like 1,000 data set. That itself can be a big challenge for a lot of companies over there. So our what we've seen has really worked is really starting with small data set, get things going and make it better and better over time, rather than trying to start with 100% accuracy, because that's not possible. That's not something which even like companies with millions and millions of data set have been able to reach. So it's all about how do you get them going, start with like let's say an acceptable accuracy, and then really make it better and better over time. So this has been an approach that we've taken, and how it's, I mean, this has really helped us to really show value to the customers like early on. And because right now if you really see, most of the things that they're doing is 100% manual. It's not even that they have any automation. So for them to even start with seeing some automation is very, very helpful. So this has been our approach, and this is how we are really differentiating in terms of getting the solution out there and in like very quickly, and showing them the value very, very quickly and closing the deal.
Mhm. You mentioned that acceptable accuracy concept, which I think is something that's so, unique to AI, and to other software it doesn't face those same kind of
Yeah.
questions. So how do you communicate that to customers and clients, and how do you talk about acceptable accuracy and how they, manage their expectations of what the AI will do?
Yeah, so let's say I'll just take an example of defect detection. So like right now, they have somebody manually deployed on the factory floor looking at every piece that's coming out of the process. If we get the AI going, it's gonna automate, but you can't replace the person. Let's say if the AI is deployed today, you can't just get the person out of the factory floor. So what we suggest is like, start going and see if he was spending uh, 5 minutes to look at one product every time. If I can bring that time to like 1 minute, right? So you're really like reducing the time that he's taking to do those processes. And over time, when you collect more and more data, and you start with, and again, like this is something which is dependent on company to company. For some, like 90% is a good number to start with. For some, 95%. It just depends on that, and then you can slowly automate those processes. I mean, or to keep getting more and more data. And another thing that we've seen is, even though you get started with 95%, whatever, there's a big chance of model drift, which is something like, now it's not always about really like, getting an AI model out there. The biggest challenge that, I've seen now with companies are talking about is that they have implemented AI. And after 6 months, the accuracy from 95% has come down to 60%. So what we really see a big opportunity out there is around model governance. It's not just about implementing AI from scratch, but like also making sure that you're keeping a check, because the environment of the factory floor can change, like how the lighting conditions might change, and all of these things also impact the way the AI models are working. So and this is something that we incorporate to our product, is also we really monitor how well the AI is doing and keep checking on the accuracy. And then we focus a lot around retraining of the models to make sure that we avoid the model drift.
That's really, yes, some of those unique challenges that come with AI, and really not with other types of software businesses. So Seamus, SpeechLab is far from your first venture, but when we're thinking about the business side, so product market fit and value propositions, what do you think differentiates the process of building an AI company from, say, a data analytics company?
Yeah, I think, well, with data analytics and the data, there are different forms of data analytics companies, right? There are people who build tools to analyze your data. There are people who build models to be deployed in your environment. I tended to focus on syndicated data, and I did build a platform for analytics of location data. You're generally after a pretty precise answer, right? And you're seeking to generate ground truth, right? With AI, you're seeking to come close to ground truth, right? You're starting some way off, and over time, you're iterating your model to get closer to that sort of golden reference. right? The grand truth, or better than a human would do, or equal to, or better than a human would do in the case of transcription, in the case of live interpretation of in translated conversations. It's much more iterative process. It's much more creative. The skill sets are very different. I've worked in speech AI. It helps actually to have an understanding, the sort of talent you're bringing in. It helps if they have an understanding of linguistics. You don't need that as a data scientist if you're, building pure data models. There's a lot going on that's more iterative, more creative. I've also noticed actually, a tendency to sort of move faster in AI and iterate faster. It's like you're not looking for a perfect kind of statistical reference that is this better. You sort of move on anecdote, particularly in the early going. It's like, yeah, just this is better. You're looking at the data. You've got a few anecdotes. It's like, let's deploy, let's test. You can always go back, right? So it's a much more creative, it's a much more fun process. I think overall, building an AI application company. There's a lot of companies now that, the buzzword is generative AI. We're kind of fit that. We're generating new content based on input. It's a much more fun area to work in. I have to say, in terms of product market fit, what I learned from Sam, who founded Otter.ai. He's a brilliant PhD, and he just had a big idea. He's like, I want to search conversations the way I search Gmail. I'm like, this was in 2017. I met him for coffee. And I was like, God, that sounds really hard. And but then I met his team. It was about 7 of them, and they were all just really smart, exceptionally bright people. And I was like, I really want to work with you guys. And so I begged them to hire me, and they did, just to help them bring it to market, talk to prospective sources of data. But what I learned there is that you can't nail product market fit in a lab or in isolation. You're not going to get it right. You've got to launch. And if I've anticipated every prospective use case for speech-to-speech translation, which again is one of these big ideas, I've probably done something wrong. I've made it so that it's hard for people to actually use my solution. So our approach is to start with some obvious use cases in mind, build for those, but make a platform that's fairly frictionless for people to adopt, right? They can pick it up, they can experiment, they can imagine how it's going to be applied in their environment. It may need to be tuned and tweaked a bit, and it may make sense for us to work with them to do that if there's a big enough opportunity. But that's and when you're building data analytics companies, you tend to actually start with a much more constrained customer set in mind. So and you can do that within AI business as well. I'm just choosing to do something broader because, again, it's just much more fun. And, I remember just a little anecdote at Otter. We got a call from a university in Kentucky. And they were like, we want to give this to students that would otherwise be reliant on volunteer note-taking in class. I'm like, this is a really compelling use case. I'm like, so there's a community of you folks involved in accessibility in higher education? Yeah, there's a group of them. And where do you all get together? So I showed up at an event in New Mexico that was happening a few weeks later, giving away fuzzy otters and taking orders. It was like a no-brainer application. So I want to be surprised in terms of product market fit. But I want to, and it's important to listen to the market, but not chop and change your product constantly. Like if you start with something in mind and you're going down a path and you're confident it's usable, across any number of applications, you've got to be pretty disciplined in terms of adding features to fit very specific use cases.
Maybe I'll open this up to the group a little bit, but I'd love to hear exactly those kind of stories. I think we talk about, the experimental mindset and being open to those iterations and changes is, this goal, but that actually takes a lot of bravery to deviate your idea a little bit or to choose to stay the course. So do any of you guys have examples of times when you maybe found a market that didn't fit your product or vice versa, and whether you chose to iterate or stay the course, and what really guided those decisions? What were the big guideposts that you held on to?
Yeah, I have a lot. Yeah, I mean, I started off as a teacher, right? And I thought, like, I had a specific problem in the pandemic. Once the pandemic changed and receded, I was like, oh my gosh, like Tidewaters, right? That water had gone out. I was like, oh, but the solution is still there. And talking to a ton of people, similar to Seamus, you figure out like, okay, like this is going to work somewhere. It required just like the hard, relentless day-to-day million Zoom calls, Zoom fatigue, just to kind of figure out, okay, where else has this gone? And for us, we found it in really interesting places that I'd never would have imagined, right? So, CEOs of remote first companies who really care about culture. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Couples therapy, everybody's switched to online therapy, and then therapy people want to go back to in-person therapy. Like, never would have imagined that, right? I thought we'd be solving math problems, right? Podcast hosts who really want to look at the difference between, what's happening on their podcast and download rates. So as we continue to talk to folks, we're seeing like, okay, this is a real viable solution in a number of different areas. And to Seamus's point, that really drives how we think about the product, because it is so flexible, it is so adaptable to so many different markets. How do we both focus, right, and then scale to other seemingly disparate areas, but also they all have the through line of really trying to tackle miscommunication, because that's at the core of every human interaction, right? Is that one moment, even if you're soulmates and you've been together since you were 14 in high school, right? There's going to be a moment where you talk past each other, and we can now use AI to capture that moment and correct for that moment, which is really exciting in terms of the potential for the future of humanity.
That's fascinating. Priyansha, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, my biggest philosophy always with the startup has been to build something with the customer. So like I always first wanted to validate the idea with the customer and then go about building the solution, because when you go heads down and start building something, and then you go out there and start talking to customers, you realize that they might not need it, which you think is a problem, but it's not necessarily that or they're ready. I mean, there's a market, maybe there's a market for it, but it might be that they're not ready. And this is something which, and especially when you go talk to a customer, you might see that they need that solution, but whatever is their priority, they're going to go for that one. So like I'll just give an example. Is initially early on, the biggest use case that I thought for manufacturing was defect detection. But when I went and started talking to a lot of customers, I realized that document digitization was a much even bigger pain than defect detection for them. And I still remember I met the CEO of the company, and after the factory tour, we could identify 5 use cases. And his reaction was that for the document digitization, he said, give me the solution and I'm going to pay for it. That kind of gives generally that doesn't happen in your first meeting with a company, right? Like they say that, hey, I need the solution. And that was a big validation for me. And then, I went out and I spoke to some other companies, and I could see that there was this use case, and to my surprise, like forget about competition, they didn't even know what AI is. So like I realized there's a huge opportunity that exists out there. There's this big use case, which can be the foot in the door. And the funny part is with this customer, we just done doing the first part, and even before that he's already talking about the other use cases we can do. So it's always about identifying that first foot in the door, and that can be something like you need to pivot, you need to focus on what they want, and then do it in a way that, which of course, it worked really well with what I was trying to really get out there for this custom for with my company. But I would always say that, yeah, go talk to your customers, listen to what they want, because at the end of the day, you have to build something which you are able to sell in the market. It's not just about what you feel is what maybe the market is not ready. So that's just something which I've believed in, and has worked for me so far.
Completely. That's a sticky note that I have on my big monitor right over here, which is that you have to find solutions for your customers. You don't find customers for your solution. And I think specifically with AI and a lot of technology-focused startups, we can get really excited and interested and passionate about the core technology, that we lose sight of what our customers are actually going to use it for or want to use it for. So that's definitely a big challenge. But I want to pick up, Priyansha, on something that you said about how in AI startups, you're often selling into customers with varying levels of knowledge and expertise or organizational readiness. So can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced and how your teams have either honed your product or your communication strategy to meet the needs of your customers?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. So what we've realized is, when we go out to these manufacturing, aerospace, or agriculture, any of these industries, and try to sell them AI, they would never ever understand. Like, you need to really talk in the language that they understand, which is going to be all around, like, the problem. So, like, if their problem is, let's say, they are having a difficulty hiring people on the factory floor, or their problem is that, they're having a lot of rejection because they're not able to identify defects in their product, or they're having issues with compliancy checks on the factory floor. So when you talk to them on with those respect, rather than like, hey, I have this great AI solution that works, they give a damn. I mean, it can be AI, it can be cloud, it can be any other technology. They don't care, right? Like, at the end of the day, what they care is how are you solving my problem? And my problem is defect detection. My problem is you need to help me identify these defects in a better way. So it's not about like really about AI. It's just about how do you create the story around, like, their problem, and show them the real business value, right? Like, if it's gonna, how is it going to impact their bottom line? Like, is it gonna help them save costs, or is it gonna make their like process easy in hiring, or how are you going to impact? Because as we all know, like, we're moving towards a time where, like, it looks like, like, close to a recession kind of environment, where things are looking to get more difficult. And then more and more companies are trying to become more lean, and and they would like to really manage the costs and become more and more efficient. And we should really draft around our solutions, AI solutions, around how can we address those in the terms that they really, really understand. So that's like the rule number one, which I feel, and I always tell my team to really draft, like, all the, business documents and everything around collaterals, everything around what the business value really looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something we talk about a lot is exactly so understanding, what value the company is trying to drive, but then also the specific person that you're selling to, or the specific customer type you're selling to. And whether you're translating your benefits into purely financial terms, that somebody who just cares about the bottom line, that's one type of customer, but somebody who also cares about the functionality, or like something that's happening internal within the business, have slightly different concerns. And so it's the question of who's buying it, who's paying for it, and what do they care about, and how to communicate that value. Exactly.
No, that's a very good point, Catherine. I completely agree. And that, like, a quality manager on a factory floor would really care about how it's going to help him with the work that he's doing. Whereas a CFO of the company would really help about how is it going to help, like, reduce the rejection rate of the company and help with his bottom line. So I completely agree that, it should be also tweaked based on who you're talking to.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm also picking up in a lot of your stories is these in-person or really direct conversations with potential customers, and how beneficial those are. I know in the early days of a startup, it's really easy to just step back into your project and work and iterate, and kind of the fear of stepping out and putting your product in front of someone. So can you talk about maybe a story of one of the most beneficial conversations that you had in the early shaping of your product?
Yeah, sure. I think so. I would have a slightly different tack actually on the prior conversation. I think there are obvious applications for AI. It's where you're using a lot of manual processes today, and it's super expensive and can't scale, right? So those are the like defect detection, pretty obvious. Transcription, no one's training to be a stenographer anymore. The median age of a stenographer is like 60, and I'm not kidding. And so there's not enough, right? There's a need. There are a whole host of new applications that are unlocked when you can automate and reduce costs. So I don't think it's hard to find applications for AI. I don't think you actually need to do a whole lot of thinking up front and talk to tons and tons of people before you build something and get it out there. So I would just say that up front. And because when you get it out there, the key is to get it out there. The key is to have, like when I was brought into AI Fund, there was an idea we were exploring. After talking to 30, 40 people. I went to an event and just talked to a lot of people, talked to people in my network and others. I was like, this idea, it doesn't excite me. I talked to another prospective co-founder who actually gave me this idea of speech-to-speech translation. She wound up not joining me on this journey, but it was a really good idea. I talked to my wife about it, who's a healthcare provider. She's like, yeah, I use remote interpreters all the time dealing with my population. I'm like, wow, 28% of California seniors can't adequately communicate with their healthcare provider. They've got low English proficiency. That's a huge market, right? So massive. There's really obvious applications. I don't think you have to overthink it. What you got to do is launch and get feedback. That's my approach. Now, there's obviously difference when you're getting into industrial AI and applications like that. But, and some of the valuable, I've got a lot of war stories, but one from my data analytics days, I worked with the godfather of quantum mental. I got the guy called Tony Berkman, who now heads up quantum mental research at 2 Sigma. But Tony, so we built this data set that he was selling to Wall Street, and I reconfigured it for industry. The key was to make it super granular, and we put it out there. It was in the mobile area. And the first application we found, the first customer we closed was Google, that wanted to use the data to prove lift in advertising. That's their primary use case in data, to sell more ads, to sell more search. We were amazed. It wasn't something we anticipated, but we had a product. We had a very usable data set that they could slice and dice in multiple ways, and they could line it up with their data. They could align it, and they could get signal, right? So the key is to actually have something that people can use and then apply in their context, just as Jason was kind of talking about. So that's what, there are differences, obviously, depending on what slant of AI you're going after.
Mm-hmm. Jason, Priyansha, do you guys have a perspective here?
Yeah, I think similar to what other panelists have said, one of the things that just sort of jumped out at me is the night before, and I say this with profound respect for what's happening in other parts of the world, but we were just doing some testing, and the night before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we ran the UN Security Council meeting through our platform just to kind of see. We were just doing some testing on sort of publicly available data to see what happened. And there was a moment where you could see, like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen because of the speech patterns. And to the point that the other panelists have made, one of the things that's happening with AI is that because of the predictive power of math, we're able to see things that previous generations of humans have not been able to see. And we telegraph so much of our intentions through our language. And now that we can capture that language and analyze it at scale in near real time, I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see some pretty profound shifts in the way that folks are interacting. And every day, we get a new use case of like, oh my gosh, to Seamus' point, like, we designed it this way and it came out that way. And I think it introduces another really, really important topic, which is ethical AI, right? And I think we're just building on the shoulders of giants. And we often talk in our company about the first person who made a chainsaw, right? I guarantee that engineer, their intention was to help farmers, ranchers clear paths, right? They did not intend to create a whole genre of horror films designed around chainsaw, right? Like that was an unintended use
So
of this
true.
profoundly new technology. And to the extent that from the beginning we can be thinking about these things and building in guardrails so that chainsaws only cut trees and not humans, I think that's part of the responsibility that we bear with handling these incredibly powerful tools.
Yeah, that's really great. I'd like to transition the discussion a little bit here to fundraising. So we've talked through some of the early foundations, some product market fits questions. I've heard some team comments, but I'd really love to talk about fundraising because I think that's one of the biggest kind of like bears to approach as an AI startup. So maybe Seamus, you can kick us off. How do you know when it's the right time to fundraise? How do you start building your list? And then what do VCs or other funders want to hear? And you're unmuted.
Muted.
Yeah. There you go.
So, God, those are big questions. First of all, I love fundraising. Who doesn't? You know, I'm
Come on.
somewhat facetious. But you know, what do VCs want to hear? You know, I think so. I'm in the middle of a process right now, and the great thing is I haven't changed my pitch one iota. I'm like, they see, you know, it seems to resonate with enough folks. So I just saw a tweet recently, and it's like, oh, that resonates. That I like that. It's like, look for believers, not converts, right? You're not going to convert anyone. And the great thing is that there's a lot of venture money, particularly in the seed stage and early stages. So, you know, if you have, they want to hear at this stage, they want to know your team is awesome. So I'm very fortunate to have an awesome co-founder, Jaydev Bila, and several others, great ML engineers. I was able to source them working with AI Fund, outstanding guys in Brazil. I had a VP of engineering I worked with before, and we launched a company together. We worked together at Millennial Media. The CEO and founder of Millennial Media invested $250,000 in our company based on just knowing us. So it's like, and I came through AI Fund, and Andrew, I worked with the godfather of quantum research. I worked with the godfather of AI, Andrew Ang, and he kicked my ass a bit. I was like, oh, I need 2 million to get started. He's like, Seamus, just get started. I'll give you, you know, just build something end to end, and we'll raise the money. So, you know, they funded it. AI Fund gave me some initial funding, and you know, so I had enough to get started. We have a product, we have a team, and now we're doing a seed round, and there's a lot of interest. Like, there's a lot of interest. The area is very hot. Last year was Web3 crypto. This year it's generative AI. So it's a hot area. There's no doubt about it. VCs just want to hear about it. I have associates reaching out to me saying, hey, we heard about SpeechLabs. I'm like, how? So there's an interest in the area. So they want to hear generative AI. That's what they want to hear first.
For now. No, we gotta keep our nose to the ground.
They don't want to hear metaverse. They don't want to hear Web3 crypto. You know.
Oh, Seamus, we paused you a little bit there. So maybe Priyansha, you can jump in here.
Yeah, so I have a very different take on this from Siemens, because I feel for like, as being a first-time founder, it's a very different story altogether. Yeah, like you need to prove yourself. You need to really see, and just think about it. Like, will you put your money on somebody if you don't know them, right? Like, it's a big thing. And I always believe, like, my way has been the best way is you should bootstrap to a certain extent. To you can get an MVP out, show your product, like, that the product has some value out there, really. And then it's about not always directly going to VCs. You should really explore friends and family, and then go to the angel route, like, and then go to VC, because it's like it's not like, always it the fundraising is not very rosy all the time. Like, it's gonna have its own challenges. It's gonna take a long time. Like, if you've had 6 months in line, it might take 9 months, it might take a year, because, so I mean, situation changes, and macroeconomics of the economics changes. These are things which are not in your control. But I would say, if you need to keep doing what you're doing, and start with, it's, for me, what has really been the biggest difference, what has brought the biggest difference. I found one angel investor who trusted me and on my vision. Like, he really help me shape, shape my product, shape what I'm doing in terms of my pitch deck, and in terms of even putting me in front of other VCs and angels out there. So I would always start with doing bootstrap, validating your product, getting one customer in, going, finding that one person who can be an advisor, a mentor, can support you, shape you. Because, I mean, I can't believe, I go back and hear myself in January to where I have come now. There's a huge difference, and it has taken time, but now I'm like very close to closing my seed round, and I can say that, I mean, it's good that it didn't happen at that point, but because maybe I wasn't prepared, right? So if people give you advices, take it, learn from it, see how you can improvise, because all these angels, funds, VCs, all of them who exist out there, they are like, they have years of experience, and they understand what they're talking about. And it's difficult to take it early on, because you're on the other side, and you're like, hey, what are they saying, but then it all makes sense, and you're going to see how it makes sense in long term. And I can say it because I have both angels and I have VCs. I have, like, both on my cap table, and I have them as investors. So I would say, but yeah, get one company right, and it's not never going to be as hard as it is the first time. But the first time is, it's not easy. I mean, fundraising is not easy, and it's never going to be easy.
Yeah. Jason, got a perspective here?
I do. I think I'm somewhere in between Seamus and Priyansha, right? And I'm really honored to hear both sides of the equation. And it has been a challenge, and it's been difficult, but nothing worth anything in life isn't. And I loved Seamus's point around the product, and the team, and the story, right? So, like, it is our responsibility. I can only control what I can control, to show up with a heck of a product, right? A great team, and a story that sort of compels somebody to actually lean over and pull out their proverbial wallet, and then put in the digits, and then after that, hit send and wire that money, right? And at the same time, when you talk about what's happening in the market, right? When you talk about first-time female founders, right? There's some challenges that go with that. First-time, founders from underrepresented backgrounds, right? There's some real challenges there. So some of the things you can control, some of the things you can't control, but to the extent that I can control, and our team can really execute on the incredibly precise mission and task that we've been given, that's only going to increase our odds. And we really sort of look at any conversation with anybody who's going to invest, whether it's a customer, an angel, or a VC, is all the same process, right? I've got to give you a good reason to give up the money that you worked really hard for, right? Exactly. And like, I can't blame you for not doing that, right? Like, if I was like, hey, do you want a half-eaten sandwich for $5? Like, you're not going to give me that money, right? I've got to get over a threshold of value for you, and that's what we concentrate on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I always think of it too. If you think of from the funder's perspective, a lot of what they're working against is risk. So as much as you can minimize your risk, so whether that's you have your first customer already in place, so you've really demonstrated product market fit, or you have really strong team members around you, or you just ran the UN through your platform. Like, those kind of fantastic stories are just ways to exactly reduce your risk, and as you communicate that to funders. So I'm going to transition over to our Slido now. So if you have not yet been on our Slido and been upvoting questions, you can jump over there now and The first question comes from Mark, and it actually leads really nicely into what we were just talking about. So what is the main difference between raising funds for an AI startup versus a non-AI startup? Seamus.
I honestly don't think there's that much difference. I think there are a set of investors that focus on hard tech and deep tech. It may not be the same set of investors that focus on marketing tech, or so there are investors with a vertical focus, but it's the same thing, like team, technology, traction, terms, like where are you at, and so I don't think, I personally don't think there's a huge difference. It is kind of like quite hot right now all of a sudden. Like we do see themes bubble up in venture. AI is a hot area, and that cuts both ways, because you don't want to be just jumping on a bandwagon. You want to approach it, hey, listen, we happen to be an AI company. We happen to be using AI in a process. We're focused on this market opportunity. So focusing on that rather than, hey, we're AI, we're doing generative stuff, is important.
Great. Next question. So this is about AI products. Sorry. I have a doctoral degree in a science field. How vital is possessing an MBA degree knowledge for funding a company and running it? Seeing a lot of shaking heads.
Not important.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
If anything, I'm a business major. I was very fortunate early in my career to work at SRI International with people who were back, when it was doing foundational work and working with really smart people. And I've gotten the opportunity to work with awesome technologists, and I learn a whole lot more from them than I do from people who have MBAs every day. And that's my own personal experience. MBAs bring a lot to the table, but I don't think it's necessary.
I would just like to add to that, is I feel like, you as a founder, the number one thing is you need to know how to sell the product that you're building. And that is something, I mean, if you feel it can come through MBA, it's not necessary, for sure. Like, you need to learn, but that is something that you need to have as being a founder. Like, or some of the things, like, I mean, if you really see running a company, you need to know the finances, you need to know a lot of things. And if you don't have, then you really need to build a team around that, people who can complement you on those skill sets. So it's not necessary to have an MBA degree, but it definitely has helped me to, like, really know a better way to, like, sell my product. So it has worked for me. So I wouldn't say it's a must, but it's definitely, it's been a big plus for me, that that I did an MBA, and I was in a class of, like, with different people, and I learned so much in that experience. And I did a lot of projects, right, like, which gave me the first experience of really being out there and, like, selling the product. So it just adds value to it, but it's not a must.
Can I jump in on that too?
Absolutely.
Because I have very strong feelings. So I think zooming out, everybody has cards, right? You have aces and kings and queens. You have some cards to play and some cards that, conventionally speaking, are sort of deficits. And you have to play to your strengths and use your strengths to cover your weaknesses. So if you have the ability and the funds and the time to go get an MBA, knock yourself out. Do that really, really well. If you don't, and you're transitioning from standing in front of 32 kids 5 times a day, 5 days a week, to try to run a tech startup, you got to do something different. And for me, it was about being an intellectual omnivore, right? So, and this is not to brag, but only to sort of communicate to the audience the level to which you have to commit to your dream. So in the last year, 365 days, I've read 101 books. And that is just the requirement to get all these things in my head to successfully feel like I can navigate the lives of the people that I represent, right? So if you can commit to that level, whatever comes after, whatever credential comes after that is going to work for you, whether it's an MBA, self-study, or, I started off, I got my start with deep learning AI, which is all self-driven. So you really, more than the credential, it's really about that commitment to always learning about everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll join you guys there that I also have an MBA, and looking back on the process, yeah, you really have to evaluate that investment, not only of money, but of time. And if you're, already on the runway for your product or really excited about it, then 2 years out of your life, 1 year out of your life might not make the difference. For me, of course, all the knowledge can be learned on the road. You can consume a lot of books. And I think the only thing that I really got from my MBA that I couldn't have gotten elsewhere are the friends.
So when I've just got one caveat, and I've always done something with a co-founder. I like having someone next to me on my journey. I grew up in a big family of 11 kids. I get lonely, when it's just me. And I've worked with PhDs as co-founders, and they're awesome, right? So that's, so if you have a doctoral degree and you feel, I'm really missing this part, and there's lots of MBAs who want to work with you, believe me. Because if you've done all that work to get a doctoral degree in a science field, I want to talk to you.
Yeah. Okay, last question is kind of a big one. So there's obviously a lot of big tech companies that are in the space, a lot of big players that are working on AI. So how do you think about your product when you're moving into a market where big tech companies exist?
I'll take that because I do have to run in just 2 minutes.
Yes.
But I'm in speech to speech. Everyone, who else? You got Google Translate, you got Microsoft, you got Alexa, Amazon. You move really fast, you're nimble, and you focus on delivering an awesome user experience and making it frictionless for people to use and adopt. And you can't control what the big guys are going to do. You focus on what you can control. And, Sam and Otter's done an amazing job building a very substantial business in transcribing meetings. You got some big companies in that category. So there's plenty of room to play. I just said.
Excellent. All right, well, we are coming right up on time. So I want to thank you all, Seamus, Priyansha, Jason. Thank you so much for your time, for your insight. This has been so valuable. And that brings us to the end of today's event. So if you're ready to build your startup, apply to join AI Link, the community by AI fund where entrepreneurs build great AI companies together. Building and leading a company can be a lonely job, and this is a place for you to get support for a community from peers who have done it before or who are in the process of building and leading an AI-focused company. You can learn more at community.aifund.ai. Deep Learning AI is also going to send a follow-up email with a survey to all of our attendees today. We would love to hear about how we make our future events better. A select 100 attendees will receive a promo code for 50% off a 1-month subscription to any deeplearning.ai courses on Coursera. Thank you to all the speakers and for everyone else for joining today. Keep learning, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.